Bum, 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 bum.
Welcome to the Good Energy Project with Lou Connor, a surprisingly hopeful show about the invisible economic forces that shape our lives, our homes, and our future on planet Earth.
Kia ora. I'm sitting with Jessica Hutchings in her lovely home in Kaitoki, which she shares with her wife Jo, and her mum lives in the house next door. The farm is called Papakāinga, where they grow veggies according to the Huaparakore system, which is a kaupapa Māori system for growing kai. It's not just about looking after the soil and our health, it's about bringing spirit back to our food. Jessica is a kaupapa Māori researcher, author and advocate, as well as being a farmer. She's the director and founding trustee of the Papakāinga Trust, which is all about decolonising our food systems and restoring indigenous food sovereignty. Her wife Jo and her have written a book about kāinga. It's called Kāinga Tahi Kāinga Rua, and it explores Māori experiences and aspirations for housing. I met Jessica through my brother Justin, who I interviewed last year about his vision for reimagining our food systems. I was lucky enough to be invited for dinner one night with Justin and the veggie vagabonds who farm his property in the Wairarapa. Jessica and Jo made us a delicious Indian feast, and we talked about the opportunities and challenges of rescuing the food system from extractive corporate interests. One thing that struck me that evening was the economic challenge of going against the mainstream food system. How do you farm or run an organisation in a way that honours Māori, mana and whakapapa in a system that's designed for making a profit? I'm really interested in how Jessica navigates those kind of challenges and where she finds hope. So, hi.
Kia ora. Hi, Lou.
Kia
Thanks
ora.
for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's so nice to be here. It's a rainy, freezing day, but we're in your cozy house. So,
Beautiful. Yeah. No mai hara mai. Welcome to Papakāinga.
Oh, thanks so much. Would you like to introduce yourself at all?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, mihi atu ki a koutou. Ko waio, ko he uri o ngai tahu me Ngāti Huirapa. Kei tahi atu taha no India tōku mama no Gujarati ia, ko Dr. Jessica Hutchings ahau. So, whakapapa to ngai tahu Ngāti Huirapa, and also to whakapapa to India to Gujarat. I'm Indian, a Māori Indian, and I live up here outside of my tribal area. So we live and we inhabit the stolen, confiscated lands from Te Atiawa. We live in their rohi and really see ourselves as manuhiri, not kaitiaki, manuhiri, stewarding 12 acres of beautiful whenua, you know, right at the foothills of the Tararua and the Ramutaka and the Orongorongo behind us and Pakuratahi Forest Park. So it's a really special place to be, and we've been up here for 20 years now. Old dairy farm, and we've converted it to initially organics through Organic Farm NZ, and when the Huaparakore verification system came online, we dropped the non-indigenous verification or organic certification and took on board the Huaparakore. So we've been proudly fully Huaparakore verified since 2011, and that's a really special thing. Yeah.
And do you think you could take us on a kind of tour of, not a physical tour, but like a tour of your farm here? Describe the different parts of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just start just by saying that the name of our farm, Papakāinga, was gifted to us by the late Huirangi Waikere Puru, beautiful kaumātua from Taranaki. And that's really special for us because it brings that Taranaki whānui, Te Atiawa link and that whakapapa onto the whenua. So I think, you know, in Te Awairua, things join up and are meant to happen for a reason. So I just happened to have this conversation with Huirangi many decades ago about it. And so I really want to honour the whakapapa of the name Papakāinga. It's an old dairy farm. When you arrive here, as you did this morning, Lou, you drive up to the house, and maybe a good way to understand it is like in permaculture, it's like zone 1. So all of our mātakai's up by the house, our fruit orchards, all of our herb gardens, our composting area, and we live kind of in a papakāinga situation. So my mum came and built a house up here about 6-7 years ago, and she's 80 now. So that's great to be independent and live in separate dwellings, but to be close by for sociality and a bit of awhi and you know, and connection. So where her house is, just below that, there's a whole bank that we're reforesting in natives, and then there's a big paddock where we sometimes graze sheep or cows. We're just in the end of transitioning a flock, and we're just about to move on been a no slaughter farm for many years. So having a family flock of animals, herd of animals, is really good for us. You can get to watch everybody stay in their whakapapa units and kind of grow up, and you get to love them up over the years. I've had probably 6 or 7 years of home killing, and that was a thing to really come into being really respectful with the taking the life of an animal, to choose to do that for meat and protein. And we just both have a feeling to step away from that for a little while again. So that's where we're at with that. But then you come out of that paddock and you move over to the other part of the farm, which is kind of intersected by the Pakuratahi awa. So this beautiful awa with the waters that flow down through the forests, you know, that surround us. It's really special to have an awa.
Special to have that.
Yeah, so beautiful, so beautiful, and it's like bathing in the forest, really, in the awa down there.
Yeah, so you can bathe in there, can you?
Oh, we're there all the time.
Oh, yeah.
We've built a little cabin down by the little kota down by the edge of the awa, and we can have a fire and cook food and hang out, and it's a great social space.
Yeah.
And then actually the majority of the farm crosses the other side of the river, and it's gorse and broom. So it's really scrappy, it's prone to erosion because the river, she's just taking up whatever berth she needs to take up. And that's probably what I'd say in permaculture is like zone 5. You know, completely wild. We look at it and go, oh my gosh, what should we do? Let's do nothing. So that's good that, you know, we're looking after a piece of land that has had no sprays or chemicals on it for 20 years, and that's really special.
And I wondered if we can sort of go back to your childhood just for a little bit. I wondered if you can remember a time when you felt really happy and in your element when you were young?
Well, I think the spirit of a child is joyous and happy. And I think that's the soul beings that we all drop from is into this field of joy and happiness. But definitely being in the nature. Definitely when I think about those moments of feeling really joyous, that's when I'm close to water, or I'm close to the forest, or I'm in the space of play.
Whereabouts were you when you were
Lots of places.
Yeah.
Like I grew up, in particular I'm thinking of Birkenhead in Auckland, so there, but also too spent about 10 years in my kind of early teens, or just, you know, maybe about 7 or 8 onwards in Australia, Sydney, Brisbane, Perth. So moved around a lot. Moved around a lot. But I think having that connection with place is something that's really been really important to me, even throughout that moving around, of finding those places that you can connect to
like
in
those
nature.
natural places,
Totally.
you were. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like you kind of drop it, that feeling of dropping into yourself.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
And do you remember when you first became aware of money?
No, not really. I saw that question. I think it was more like you just socialise that money's there in your upbringing. It's just something that's there. The memory of it is that it's something that adults do and it's important. When you're a kid, you don't have to really think about that. That was my experience. So no, not really. I mean, I think that's the thing about dominant culture, isn't it?
You don't notice it.
No, you don't notice it. It's all around you.
Yeah. And I'm wondering about your process of sort of becoming aware of the impact of colonisation and and our economic system. Were you aware of that early on, or how did that get revealed to you?
I have always had an awareness of inequities and inequalities and imbalances of power that create those situations. And so that's, I mean, at a very young age, that's an economic analysis of the current system that's around you.
Was that just through the people you knew, situations?
Yeah, and the political conscientising conversations I grew up with around in the family, at the dinner table. Grew up in a mixed race family. You know, I'm adopted, my sister's adopted, she's Fijian, Indian and Māori. We're completely all shades of the rainbow, my family, when we get around the table. So it was different. Conscientised, politically aware, engaged in politics and race, gender, class struggles and things like that. So,
So you were telling me what you did your PhD on?
So my PhD, my Te Ukaipo Te Whakaruruho is the name of it, and it's a mana wahine analysis, a Māori feminist analysis of genetic engineering. So, you know, a lot of the critique around biotech or deep tech is from very masculinist standpoints. And so to be able to bring indigenous women's critique to these imperialist biocolonial technologies was something I was really driven to do. And the PhD actually just became a vehicle for the expression of the activist work that I do. So, and that's, you know, the continuation, I think, throughout my career is that I've used research or rangahau as that tool to be able to support activist movements to express my standpoint, really clear standpoint.
Do you feel like you're an activist first and then a researcher?
No, I don't. I think everything is just one. Yeah, everything's just one.
So my focus for this year is around home and kāinga and how we find a sense of belonging where we are. One of the things that's inspired me is just noticing how in our system people are drawn away from their homes to find work, and also with the impacts of colonisation, just the displacement, especially of Māori from their kāinga, and it just seems like people are quite often displaced and disconnected. So I'm really interested in efforts to kind of rebuild those connections.
So I've spent quite a bit of time in the recent years working in the Māori housing sector, leading the Māori research program in the Building Better Homes, Towns and Cities National Science Challenge as their director Māori, and helping to kind of create research settings which can build Māori research and capability in the Māori housing area. So we didn't really have a Māori housing researcher workforce. So the research and the evidence and the storytelling that was out there around Māori housing, you know, prior to the establishment of these challenges, was mainly driven by Pākehā. And so that's a great legacy for that National Science Challenge to leave behind.
That was only sort of 10 years ago, was it, that started?
Yeah, they've just finished now. Yeah, they've just finished now. So they've all wound up. But that book, Kāinga Tahi Kāinga Rua, that Joe and I edited, profiled the research from that research platform. So there's so much to say about Māori and the housing space. And, you know, we're not just talking about homes, we're talking about land. If we think about the place-based nature of Māori communities and the way that Māori communities live in papakāinga and intergenerationally, one of the things that colonisation actively destroyed and continues to destroy is the way that Māori choose to live on their land and within their kāinga, within their own structures. So when you remove a people from their land, you essentially destroy their kāinga and their ways of living. So it's not just the housing, it's actually you destroy the gendered relationships, you destroy the family units, you destroy the extended family units, you destroy the indigenous foodways, colonise the waterways, you displace the means of work and the units, labours of production, and it all gets shifted up into a framework and a way of being that's completely foreign because it's that way of being that's been imported and imposed on you by the coloniser. So Māori housing is, you know, in the crises that we face at the moment, is the really sharp end of 200 plus years of land confiscation and oppression of Indigenous peoples in this country. And it's no wonder that we're in the crisis that we're in. I think one of the big barriers for Māori in terms of housing is, one, access to land, and two, ensuring that the policy and the regulatory settings are actually right so that it enables us to be able to live intergenerationally again. So for example, for us up here at Papakāinga, this is not Māori land, although, you know, in Western title, it's bought it under private land ownership, and Mum lives here and she built one house, and we've built one extra house on the property, but there's massive regulations around that. 30 metres from the main dwelling, a floor print of no more than, I don't know, 35 square metres or something like that. And now we're at our limit. But we're on 12 acres and there's a housing crisis.
Much room and
And I come from communities which live intergenerationally, and we want to look after people. But there's no other room to put other people here legally. You know, we've got a couple of cabins that are within the minimum sizing to not need any consents that people can come and stay in. And we definitely had a lot of people live with us during lockdown. So the settings don't enable us to come back to live how we used to.
I got the sense that in your book, there was a sense of maybe some hope or some...
Oh, well, the hope is, and the aspirations are always that we deliver Māori determined solutions for these issues. We're not going to see emancipation in housing for Māori from the house of the coloniser at all. Those Māori solutions of... and coming back through Māori architecture and working with Māori architects to really help to envisage those solutions in a really tangible way, to bring kaupapa Māori architecture into the rebuilding of Māori communities and kāinga. So we're not just talking about a house when we talk about Māori housing crisis, we're talking about the rebuilding of the fabric of Māori communities back on ancestral lands.
I listened to an interview with you and you talked about the woven universe.
Oh, yes.
And I love that idea. It's not just a house, it's all the connections that are woven around that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's Māori Marsden's language. He describes Te Ao Māori, or the Māori world view, Māori world, as an interconnected woven universe. And I love it as well. It makes me think of stars and soil, the interconnected woven universe. Yeah, I think it's beautiful. If I think about, you know, just going back to the notion of housing, and Moana Jackson, who we published his keynote from a housing conference in the front of the book, Kāinga Tahi Kāinga Rua, and he talked about how even though Māori are, you know, this notion of homelessness, he said Māori aren't homeless. You know, we have a connection back to our ancestral maunga, to our mountains, to our ancestral rivers, to our waterways. And so this notion of home really is embedded into the notion of tūranga waiwai. Notion of place and where we stand and our connection in our cultural landscape.
So it's not a matter of building a new home, it's a matter of connecting? Or?
Well, it's both. And that's why papakāinga is really important, you know, and this government's halted the investment in papakāinga. I definitely got some friends and colleagues whose housing is really precarious now because of that. They had some beautiful intergenerational plans on their iwi land and community again. And so it requires investment. When white settler society has built its wealth, and this nation has built its wealth off the confiscation and the theft of Māori land, it's going to take a big reinvestment to turn that around in some time. But it's really important that we call it out.
I'm interested in this idea of kāinga tahi, kāinga rua, and the idea of your second home. How do you find a sense of home in the place when you're displaced from your ancestral home?
And I think that's exactly what kāinga tahi, kāinga rua refers to. So kāinga tahi being the ancestral home, which a lot of people, you know, for work reasons or displacement reasons due to confiscation, are no longer able to live or inhabit that kāinga tahi, and so you move to a kāinga rua. And there's another place that becomes home. And a really good example of that is the movement from the far north into Taitokerau, from Ngāpuhi, Ngāti Hine, down into Tāmaki Isthmus, into Tamaki Makaurau. And people often describe it as the urban migration. But as Moana Jackson would remind us, Māori weren't aimlessly wandering around off their ancestral lands of their own accord, looking to migrate somewhere else. It was a forced migration due to theft and displacement from land. But what you have after, probably the third generation now being born in Tāmaki, maybe even the fourth, generations of communities who have moved due to that dislocation, is you find the establishment of a kāinga rua. And then this is this other place where communities form communities, they form connections, and they're able to find home there. We can never leave just because the settler colonial government and the powers of colonisation are writ large over our whenua. It doesn't mean that we leave those ancestral connections that we have there.
How do you find being on this land here and being manuhiri or a guest and building a home here?
I find it really peaceful and really gentle, actually. And we're very purposive and very clear that although we're Māori, definitely not mana whenua, we have good relationships with people in Te Atiawa and also too with the Wellington Tents Trust. We see ourselves as manuhiri, as visitors, as guests on somebody else's land that we steward. We wouldn't even use the word kaitiaki because for me kaitiakitanga is connected to that kaupapa of mana whenua, of having mana over the whenua, and that's the notion of mana whenua. So that's not us here. We have this privilege to kind of look after this land in the best way we can.
That's really nice to hear that it's quite relaxing. Did you say relaxing or was it another word?
Yeah.
Gentle, maybe.
Yeah, at peace with it. Yeah, clear about our standpoint and the obligations that are bestowed on you when you live on a piece of whenua and have the deep feeling that you're manuhiri. What does that actually mean? How then do you look after it?
I've been talking to my brother Justin. He lives in the Wairarapa just over the hill from here, and he's been establishing some things like a carb club where people across the community grow potatoes and share them with each other, potatoes and other carb vegetables, and they have Lamb Town where someone's raising lambs and then providing meat for various people, and I quite like that sense of re-establishing those networks. They're not in the normal marketplace, they're more sharing, but I wonder how your networks are growing here.
I love what Justin's doing over there, and we were part of Lamb Town as well.
It
was very good.
I heard that.
Within our community, like immediate community right around us, we've got, why am I hesitating? I'm hesitating because I live in a very white neighbourhood, and so there are not Indigenous people or many Māori around in Kaituki, to be honest. And so my community for me is the people I work with in the Māori food sovereignty space, nationally and internationally, reo Māori communities, Māori growers in the Hutt Valley. So we've sought to kind of establish our own communities through projects like Feed the Whānau, which is an initiative in the Hutt Valley and over into the Wairarapa to bring Māori food growers, food farmers together and to network. We have to go a bit further than just like our back gate or over to the neighbours. I mean, we've got good relationships with the neighbours, but sometimes, just very different.
And I like the sound of in the Huaparakore community that you visit each other's farms and kind of offer that kind of support and community.
Yeah, that's part of the process of Huaparakore, which is, the Huaparakore is a Māori indigenous organic verification and validation system for kaiatua or pure foods, or Māori organics is kind of another easy way to think about it. And I was really involved in that research project in about 2005, so a long time ago now, where we spent 3 years going around the country and talking to Māori healers and Māori organic growers about the need for a Māori organic verification system. And did they think this was something that was important? And it was a resounding yes. And then we asked that, our research question was, what is a Māori organic product? What constitutes Māori organic product? And it's based on those 6 infinite values based on the wisdom of our tūpuna, mana, mauri, whakapapa, mana, te ao tūroa, and māramatanga. And so the process, when you said, the verification process for Huaparakore, it is almost like getting collective consent. You're accountable back to your communities, your Māori communities, and you get verification and validation from your communities that what you're doing is tika, not from a random auditor who comes in filling out heaps of paperwork. And I think that's exciting, because that's like rebuilding indigenous food communities, which is about rebuilding kāinga. It's about rebuilding homes again, When we talk about reimagining kāinga, I reimagine them with thriving Māori food communities around them. Yeah, beautiful.
So nice.
Yeah.
And can you tell me about the Papakāinga Trust and the work that you're engaged in there?
All of the food work we've been doing over the decades kind of culminated in the emergence of this beautiful trust, Papakāinga, which is about uplifting Indigenous seed, soil and food sovereignty through education, research and practice. So we're kairangahau, we're kaupapa Māori researchers at heart, and we are producing a range of kind of beautiful objects, short films, beautiful book coming out at the beginning of the year next year called Pātaka Kai, Growing Kai Sovereignty. And then the other thing that the Trust is involved in through the work that I do is this 8-part TV series for whakata Māori. It's actually called Huaparakore, Rebuilding Our Broken Food System. So we're storytellers, we're activists, we are researchers, and we're kind of providing, I suppose, like dot connecting, joining up across the food system, holding impactful hui and bringing growers together and helping to amplify those spaces where we can be transformative and act transformation in the food system.
Yeah, because I heard about, you had a conference earlier in the year that brought people together. What, can you tell me about that?
That was called He Whenua, an Indigenous Seed, Soil and Food Sovereignty Symposium, held at Te Mahurihuri Marae in Tāmaki Makaurau in April this year. And we brought out Dr. Vandana Shiva to come and share kōrero with us around capitalist patriarchy and the impact of capitalist patriarchy on Indigenous seed, soil and food sovereignty. So I think it's really, really important. It's definitely been, something that threads all the way through my academic work, my research work, is to stay connected to international critical thinkers. So how wonderful to have her here.
She's a bit of a giant.
Well, she's a bit of a giant, and I consider her to be the most important environmental activist of our time. Relentless to speaking truth to power, relentless to calling out capitalist patriarchy. And it's been a constant critique for decades, so that was such a privilege.
She's very practical. Doesn't she have a farm in India? And
she has a beautiful farm called Navdanya in Dehradun, 5 hours north from Delhi, and we visited it last year and filmed an episode there for the TV series.
Yeah, cool.
And I'm just about to go up again in October to take a declaration for seed and soil up to Navdanya to present on International Food Day. So it's a nice start of an emerging relationship there, which is really cool. Beautiful.
Yeah. Something I'm interested in, because I've been looking at economics, and I think I mentioned it in my introduction, like what are the challenges of doing this kind of farming in the current economic system, and have you discovered any secrets or wiggle room?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to, from my standpoint and my positionality as a queer activist, scholar, researcher, farmer, is to have a critique of the current economic system and its unfulfilled need to consume and extract from nature and the unfettered need to, unfettered growth. And so I think the framing of the question, I don't know, that I'm more interested in talking about is how can we hurry up the demise of capitalism so it can consume itself or compost itself to decay. And as I heard someone else say on a podcast recently, it's like kind of leave behind in that composting of capitalism the bits that are actually going to get us to this new world, to this reimagined new world.
Yeah.
So I'm very much of the belief, and I think back to writers like E.F. Schumacher, Small is Beautiful, Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, and then of course indigenous writers around this notion that small is beautiful, that actually we need a new way of thinking about economics or value. And I don't even feel comfortable about those words, to be honest.
Which one's the
value? To think about the value of economics, to think about our relationships with nature in that way. I think for me, what capitalist patriarchy and the current economic order have contributed to such a big turn away from our relationship with nature and Earth Mother that we no longer feel connected. And so this capitalist model of based on an extractive logic that places us over and above in the hierarchy of nature has meant that we've forgotten how to come into a right relationship with nature. What does that actually mean?
Yeah.
And so while we might tinker with other legal instruments that of course are tied to economic systems, like legal personhood status or the legal-based movements to return rights to nature, while all of those movements are great and it's exciting to see amazing beings in our natural environment being given personhood status, I don't know what behaviour that actually changes on the ground at a heart space for people. And so how can we return to come into right relationship with nature? And what I mean by that is that's about how do you return to that connection, but more importantly, how do you return to being able to be open to the spirit that is held within nature, and come to know ourselves again as spirit beings. And no form of economics or legal instrument is going to facilitate a pathway for humans to return to that right relationship in a spiritual sense with nature. And so this is why I'm so excited about the end of capitalist patriarchy and the rise of the feminine spirit. And I don't mean that in a bounded, gendered form either. I mean talk about that energetically. And I also too, from there, really in the work that we're doing, are privileging the voices of Indigenous women. And I've been doing this in my work forever, for decades. I think what drives a lot of my work. And it's just becoming clearer and clearer now why I'm doing that. And it's because Indigenous women are the closest to Mother Earth because they hold that relationship with Mother Earth on behalf of humanity. And so this is why listening to the voices of Indigenous women is so important right now. Capitalist patriarchy's had its time. It's not serving the planet well. And it's going to consume itself and eat itself to death. And we just have to rise at the vibration in the spiritual realm to be able to counter that. And that's where I'm hopeful, because communities that I'm connected with are doing that. Your brother's doing that. So again, it's not in a gendered body form locked into that. It's actually about giving rise to feminine awakening of our relationship back to nature through the realm of spirit.
I am, great. I met with Justin, my brother, for breakfast yesterday, and I asked him what he would like me to ask you, and he said, "Do you have any thoughts on how huapara kore might be integrated into the sort of commercial food system, or how it might scale up and be available to more people?"
I have an aspiration that happens. What I've found with the huaparakore, because I had the beautiful privilege of working with our elders who visioned this huaparakore system but have now passed away. And they were of another Māori world, of another time. That's before my time. This is a generation of people who grew up with traditional knowledge, with their reo, with intact mātauranga being passed down. What I've learned in my huaparakore journey is everything happens in good time. And it should, and what happens is what happens with it. So if it unfolds and moves into, expansionism in that commercial space, then that's what it does. Have to have trust in the kaitiaki that are holding the kaupapa of huaparakore, that they can determine collectively where it goes. So it is not, I'd be disappointed if it ends up just being driven by commercial imperative, because the purpose of the huaparakore, from my deep involvement with it and helping to build the system, is that it is a coming back to ourselves as Indigenous peoples, or to our divine Indigenous senses. And that's what's really important about it. It's a way of reconnecting again to indigeneity and to cultural food systems. And then for those non-Indigenous peoples that are joined up on the huaparakore system, it's a pathway of how to be a really good treaty ally. That's really exciting.
And is there any, does it need more funding, or
Oh, look, of course it needs more funding. Yes, of course it needs more funding. And this is why Te Waka Kaiora, it's really important that they're on that. They're always on it. We always need more funding. But it's mahi aroha that keeps this kaupapa going. And so I really hope that the people who come into the system are aware and have a compassion that we're not a biogrow, we're not an organic farm NZ, we're not a agri-shore organic standard, and we're a kaupapa Māori verification system with kaupapa Māori ways of working based on aroha, manaakitanga, whanaungatanga and whakapapa, and that we need to elevate those ways of working.
Well, that's one thing that strikes me is, because it's so connected, you're doing one thing around food, but it's feeding people and it's feeding so many parts of us that it's quite good value for money.
But no money, right? Because we're taking money out of the food system.
Yeah,
well, food is a kaupapa, it's a project, it's a discourse and, a knowledge system. It's actually our whanaunga. It's actually our relation. Food is our relation. When I think about Māori food sovereignty, I think about food as whanaunga. That comes from our cultural landscapes, our spiritual landscapes of the deities of Tāne Mahuta of the forest, of Haumia-tiketike, of Hineahuone, deity of soil, Papatūānuku and Ranginui. So when we understand that food comes from those landscapes of our deity and that we consume it and that we are connected to those landscapes through our whakapapa of being the youngest sibling of, the youngest in the order, then food is whanaunga, and that's kind of exciting. That gives you a whole nother relationship.
And a whole lot of people and a whole lot of support behind you, I guess.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
Terms of all the whanaunga and ancestors.
Yeah, and I often talk about Māori food sovereignty as being about returning to eat your cultural landscape. And if we think of food as whanaunga, it's like we're eating our whanaunga. It's kind of, but anyway, I don't know how good that sounds, but
I suppose I've been grappling with, one of the problems I've been grappling with is just noticing me in my own life. I rely on having a job to get money, and then I live in the city, so I have to go to the supermarket for food, and then I have to go to the bank for money, and I'm just really, I had this image of suckling the industrial mother pig, and I'm one of the hopes of this project is that I find a way to release at least some of my energy from that system, but also it seems like life necessitates working with those sort of less than appealing structures, and not kind of rejecting them fully because I still need money to survive, and it's going to be too stressful if I don't, kind of thing. So I wondered how you relate to that kind of.
It reminds me of a paper that Tāne Mahuta wrote called, I don't know if this is the name of her paper, but it's definitely a phrase that she's coined, caught in the contradictions of a colonised reality. And that is our reality, you know, as Indigenous peoples or as non-Indigenous peoples, we're caught in the contradictions of having to live in the house that we're trying to pull down at the same time.
Exactly.
I know, absolutely. Little by little by little, you know, little by little, and then they all add up, right? It's like reclaiming your language, your reo. Doesn't matter, aha ko he iti te reo, ka puta mai te reo. Doesn't matter how small the bits of the language are that you can speak the language, speak the words, you know, everything you can say, just start saying it, or else we end up speaking English. And so I know this from my experience as a mother, with my son going through kohanga reo and kura kaupapa, that although I always consider myself a learner of the language, that it's just so important to use every bit of it. And so all those bits that we can pull away from the system, just max it out and stay in those bits as long as you can. I mean, we are absolutely incensed about paying taxes to this government and having those three idiot men be in control of our money. More recently, we've been interested in exploring alternate economies on blockchain.
Oh, yeah.
And that's been really exciting. We've been involved in the first Ma Earth Grants round that Matthew Monaghan has run.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I needed a lot of techie help.
Definitely.
But Matthew was testing out, and I'm probably going to get this all wrong, but he was testing out, I'm going to get it all wrong, but I don't know. I have to edit it out. But I can say about it.
Yeah, can you say about it?
Is that he brought together a community of about 15 like-minded projects, land restoration, and these are projects all around the world. And it was basically crowdsourced funding on blockchain. So you had to have a crypto wallet to be able to go in there and to make a donation. And there was a matching pool of funding that they put up. And it was quadrant funding. So it wasn't based on the level of donation that you receive. It was based on how many donations, how many people contributed, what they would match, what the funding pool was matched on. So it kind of was a way to elevate those projects with heaps of community support.
Yeah, cool.
Not heaps of
money per person, but heaps of people.
Heaps of people. So it was the start for him. You know, he really sees that there's the potential for, as he says it, to fund, the regeneration will be funded, is his tagline. And so I'm interested in playing in that world. One, because we met a whole community of people on this blockchain over Zoom, so we're doing land restoration projects, who all can't wait for capitalism to fall over and are playing in this world of alternate economies. We didn't have to put any money in initially, and we came out with some funding, so that was really exciting.
You came out with real money, like you came out with money rather than Did you come out with cryptocurrency or money?
You have to put it through an exchange to then bring it down into the fiat money system. But what's great about, what I love about the blockchain is if you don't bring the money down into the fiat system, we can actually do transactions on chain, and then that money doesn't come down into this government's hands and the banking regulations. But we are bringing the money down into the fiat system because we're using it for our land restoration project here on the farm to turn a paddock back into forest. And of course, as soon as we take that money through that exchange and bring it into this currency, fiat currency, then we have to pay taxes and all of that. So, you know, just making sure that we're doing everything right. But
that's quite exciting.
It's really exciting.
Really bringing two different worlds together, it seems.
Well, it's also too, this is a thing about rebuilding alternate communities and economies, leaning into a beautiful, trusted relationship with a friend across in the next valley who's got skills in this area, who said, look, I'm going to trial this, so I'll take you on a journey with me, you can trust me. We trust him, and so we went on that journey, and it's interesting. I know there's people are really sceptical about it, but there has to be, you know, the notion of doing something outside of the system is utterly appealing.
And I interviewed Helen Dew from Living Economies, I don't know, and also Brian Innes, who's part of that.
Oh yes.
And they've been developing knowledge around alternative economies for years. But, it seems that the cryptocurrency is a new technology that would really make this viable.
Absolutely, and you know, I truly believe like this generation of babies being born, they'll be so literate with it, it'll be like picking up an iPhone. You know, unlike people like my age group, it's like, oh my God, what's my password again? But decentralising the finance system, come on, we need alternatives. This is not okay, what's going on. We become complicit in this extractive logic that's destroying the planet. It's just, not okay. So
cool. What's your vision for an indigenous food system in Aotearoa? If you could have anything in the world.
I have a vision for indigenous food systems in Aotearoa that are thriving, connected to people at place, that are intergenerational, that are huaparakore, and that are just like creating this well-being of Māori, rich, abundant kai for people. That's, you know, generating beautiful, healthy people, lands and soils, where we have sovereignty over our seed, and where it becomes like the hub of the community, where food again is this, and how we grow it, and our relationship with soil and seed is right at the heart of communities. And while it's a vision, it's happening in place anyway. And what we found in the research for our new book, Pātaka Kai, Growing Kai Sovereignty, is that different Māori communities are doing it in different ways throughout Aotearoa, and that is super, super exciting. Sure, it could be upscaled, but it's not like we're starting from scratch. It's like, you know, you got to always, I think, you know, in this type of work, it's really important to feel like we are doing things, not like we're not doing things because it's all so dire. Actually celebrate what's happening, what amazing things our people are doing.
What gives you hope and a sense of light for the future?
Being in the nature. And being connected to te ao wairua, something that's bigger than the extractive logic of capitalism, to be able to know that we were with a higher consciousness, that our role to play, or my role to play in that, is to stay connected and to help maintain that and to open that pathway for other people. And food is an opportunity to do that, because it's that connection back with hands in the soil, with Hineahuone and with nature.
And how does that connect with kāinga and sort of home?
Well, that all of that happens at the space of home. That food growing doesn't become separate from the place where we rest our head at night, or the place where our tūpuna are buried. That actually we have all of that intergenerational connection and culture and language all around us all the time, because it's happening within flourishing, thriving communities.
For me, that connects with what you said before about regaining the, I think you said feminine or matriarchal kind of strength, because at home has been a place that's been really sidelined, and
I think
bring that into the centre again.
Absolutely, and connecting with thinking around rematriation, how we rematriate not only our seeds, but how we rematriate the places of home again, and have that ability to be able to create and describe what home is.
What do you mean by rematriation?
Rematriation is a movement that's really being led out by Indigenous women in Turtle Island, and it's Indigenous women's led movement to land back, to right relationship with nature, to soil sovereignty, to seed sovereignty, to food sovereignty. And at the heart of it, it calls for a return back to right relationship with nature again and opening to te wairua or to that spiritual world. And the notion of rematriation is deeply connected to that movement being led out by Indigenous women. So Indigenous women are rematriating the sacred feminine principle back into the everyday lives of everybody in the world. That's the work that's in front of us right now. This is the work of lifting high vibration, is to be able to rematriate the sacredness back. And within that, we'll find that right return to nature.
Love it. I've got a last question. If you can imagine that you're 80 and you're surrounded by people you love and sitting in a very comfortable chair.
That sounds beautiful.
Looking out at maybe your marakai or a beautiful view. If you look back at your life, what do you feel most proud of?
All that I've really loved my family, and my family's really loved me, and we've all stayed in relationship. That would be really, really important for me. I think I'd be looking out at trees that I probably would have planted maybe 50 years earlier if I'm 80. And that would be really beautiful, to be able to leave the whenua re-cloaked and to be able to see that next generation coming forward in a land that's more forested than what it was when I got here. And that's definitely how we are stewarding and leaving this farm for the next generation. Yeah.
Nice. Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
Just to thank you for the work that you're doing and the elevating of the kaupapa of questioning capitalism, questioning how we live in the everyday. Thank you for making room for Indigenous discourses in your podcast series and the views of Indigenous women in that. Yeah, so, you know, like community isn't something for me that's othered and over there.
Yeah.
So, thanks for bringing your community into our place and helping to make those connections, Lou.
It's a real privilege to be here. And I really admire the work you're doing. So thank you so much.
Oh, ngā mihi kia koe, kia ora.
Kia ora.
Oh, bless. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Good Energy podcast. And thanks to Jessica's wife, Jo Smith, for this guitar music. Jo is an amazing researcher, teacher, writer, and co-conspirator on all of the kaupapa we've been talking about. If you'd like to follow up on some of the things Jessica mentioned, I've added some links to the show notes. Just go to thegoodenergyproject.substack.com.